my name is Grace Hardy, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in primary school. I think being a business owner is like constantly putting out fires every single day. And I don't think I've actually had one day where there's been no issues. How do I become from no one into someone?
It's a founder week on Women Are Good Business, the podcast, and we have with us this week the brilliant Grace Hardy. Now she is going to tell us her story of starting an accounting firm in her early 20s, but as you'll learn as we go through the episode, it's not the only business that she has started, and she's got so much wisdom to share. So please do help us make these episodes go viral. Like, follow, share wherever you can, so we can make sure that women founder stories are told. But in the meantime, enjoy the episode. Grace, welcome to the podcast. I'm really interested in hearing your story today, and I know our listeners are going to be as well. So I'm just going to kick us off with, tell us a little bit about you, what your business does, and how you got into business.
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. So a bit about me. My name is Grace Hardy, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in primary school. So I always really struggled through education. And when it got to the point of the school putting pressure on me to go to university, I turned around to my mum and said I couldn't think of a worse place to go. I don't want to go. Is that okay? And she said that's absolutely fine as long as you take a further qualification. And I said, how though? Because I thought you could only do university. And at the time she was a training provider for NHS healthcare apprenticeships. So she turned around and said, well, do an apprenticeship then. And very naively I said, I thought you could only do those in hairdressing and construction, and I don't want to do either of those. And she said, don't be so silly. So I went around the country going to all these apprenticeship fairs, and they basically have them in every single industry. So I wound up in an accounting apprenticeship when I was 18. I stayed there for 3 years. I became a qualified accountant when I was 20. And then I decided to leave at 21 and set up my first business, Hardy Accounting, which is an accounting firm because I couldn't think of a more original name than putting my last name on it and accounting.
So that's such a really interesting journey. So do you think the dyslexia had an impact on kind of wanting to go into business on your own?
I always knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I didn't really know what it was. So I was that bizarre kid selling sweets from my school locker. Yeah, so we used to get American sweets off eBay because no one had them. And then I would put them in my PE locker because it was the only one you could actually lock. And then at break time, I would sell them. And obviously that was just to make a little bit of money so I could go out and buy things. But that was almost like the first business. But I didn't even realise it at the time. And then I always knew I wanted to start a business, but I wasn't very good at anything. So I was like, I'd love a business, but I don't really know what in. And it wasn't until I realised that with my accounting qualifications, I could start a business. So I was like, well, I wanted to go travel and find myself like every other 20-year-old girl. But I was like, oh, let's give this 3 months. And if it works, amazing, I'll have my own business. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But at least I've given myself the opportunity to try. And then I'll go back to finding another job.
And I guess 20 is very young to have qualified as well. So you must have ploughed through those exams.
Yeah, I was a bit of a crazy nerd, and I wanted to take like 2 to 3 exams at a time just to get them all out of the way. So I would work 9 to 5 in my corporate job, and then I would study from 6 till 10 every single day, and then on the weekends I would study the entire day just to get them out of the way and done.
That's pretty tenacious for someone of that age, because most of us were off at uni. I mean, granted, studying, but partying probably too much as well. But you clearly had that real focus of get it done.
Yeah, I just thought an apprenticeship is such an amazing opportunity because you're being paid, which is amazing, and your employer is paying for you to be there and to learn. They're paying for your qualifications. So I was like, if I don't take this opportunity, then to be honest, I will have wasted it. Because you see so many people who drop out because it's really difficult and they're not expecting it to be that difficult because you're balancing full-time work with a qualification on the side. Whereas at university, it's just the qualification. And so it is difficult. And there was times where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is horrible. This is really hard. But it was about completing it, and it was just a stepping stone for me in my career. So I wanted to basically get it over as soon as possible.
And where does that tenacity come from? Because that's a quite tenacious characteristic.
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I think it probably comes from my grandparents. So my grandfather had a business. I didn't see him work in it because when I was born it was sold. But I think that characteristic probably comes from him.
So it's something you kind of were surrounded by, and it's just kind of by osmosis listening to stories. And
yeah, and it was also the fact that I come from a single parent background. So we weren't the most wealthy family growing up. And so if I wanted something, it was, well, then you need to go out and make money and then buy it for yourself, because no one else is going to give that to you, essentially. So I got my first job when I was 12. And then basically since then, I've been working, and I know, and it's kind of drilled into me, if I want to have a life that I enjoy, then I need to build it for myself, because I can't rely on anyone else to build it for me.
Yeah, and I think that kind of learning that grit at an early age is quite a common theme for entrepreneurs. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you managed to start your own business. Kind of, you said, I thought I might go travelling if it didn't work, but clearly it has. So, like, what were those first steps? Because going from being an accountant in a corporate, getting qualified, to leaping out to doing it on your own, that's quite a big step. So when was the first time where you thought, oh, actually, I can do this?
So it was my last exam. Just before I was sitting it, I came across this campaign from my professional body called Be Your Own Boss, and essentially it was all about how the qualification meant that you could become your own boss, and I was like, wow, that's so cool. So I basically told my mum, as soon as I have got my last exam result and I've passed, because I was like quite cocky and confident, I was like, I'm leaving and I'm doing it for myself. And she turned around, because all she's ever wanted for me was a stable job. And at the time, after my last exam, I would have been going on to 40k as a 20-year-old, which is a lot of money for someone my age. And she was like, what do you mean you're going to quit your job? She was like, this is such a terrible idea. What are you doing? And I was like, no, like I really want to be self-employed. And she went, well, that's absolutely ridiculous. So I got my final result. I, quite on a whim, handed in my letter of resignation at work. I was very lucky that I had saved up money during my apprenticeship, because I actually wanted to buy a house and like do all that kind of stuff. So I took that house deposit and I said, okay, well, now I'm going to use this for travelling. And then checked the weather in Bali, and it was rainy season for the next 3 months, which is how I came to the fact that I would give it 3 months. And so I was like, brilliant, I've actually just made myself unemployed. I've got absolutely no plans. I basically have to make this work for 3 months and then I can go away. So I was like, brilliant, how does one actually start an accounting firm? So I sat there with my laptop and I downloaded a business plan off the internet, and I basically sat for a couple of hours and filled it in and reverse engineered how much money I'd need to match my corporate salary that I was on at the time. And then I was looking into it and I was like, wow, I need to get all this stuff. I need to get my license, I need to get my AML supervision, I need insurance, I need ICO. And I was like, okay, so I was writing down all my startup costs. And then I basically just sat at a desk all day, every day, doing all these little bits and bobs. So legally I was covered, because I didn't realise there was so much that went into it. I thought you just started up, but I was very wrong. So I got all the legal bits sorted. And then I was like, brilliant. Now, how do I become from no one into someone? So I was like, okay, well, I've seen loads of people posting on social media, so I'll do that. So I started posting about how I quit my corporate job and I became a business owner, even though at the time I had 0 clients. And that did really well. People were so interested. They were like, wow, I can't believe you've done this. Like, how did you plan? And I went, I didn't have a plan. I just kind of like jumped into it. And so I was posting on social media, like tax tips and breaking down accounting concepts into like really easy terms for people to understand. And from there, people were like, wow, I really want to work with you, because you don't like talk about all this jargon and these accounting terms I don't understand. You're just like really down to earth and lovely. So then I started getting my first clients. And then by the end of the 3 months, I had actually matched my corporate salary just from posting on social media. and it was amazing. And I was getting speaking opportunities because I was posting on LinkedIn how I was building this accounting firm, and it kind of just went from there, which was really crazy.
And what do you think? You said it. You talked about it in kind of normal language rather than accounting language. What do you think it was that clearly appealed? Do you think that's what it was, or just the fact that you'd thrown yourself out there?
It's always a bit of both, but I think that if you say the word accountant, you're probably thinking of an old white man in a very poorly tailored grey suit. And that's what accountants are perceived as. And then when someone younger comes in, not in a grey suit, and they go, wow, this is really like a breath of fresh air, because I thought accountants were really scary, so I didn't want one. Or I've had a bad experience because my dad's accountant was given to me for my business, but he actually didn't understand what I was doing, and I didn't understand what he was telling me. But actually, if you can take a young person and put them in front of a young business owner, they can actually just have a conversation on the same level. And there's no such thing as a stupid question, because you feel like you're the same.
Yeah, and I think for founders, I've found this is a lot of them kind of shy away from the money as well, rather than embracing. Obviously, you did the first thing, you got a business plan and you reverse engineered earning the money. That's probably pretty rare for a founder, probably not rare for an accountant who's a founder. But do you find when you're talking to other founders and the people that you work with that they shy away from understanding how the money works?
Yeah, 100%. They go, I haven't looked at the numbers and I don't really know what it means. And I go, okay, brilliant. Well, we need to put you on a system where you can understand your profit and loss and where you're at. Because most people don't know if they're making a profit or a loss each month. And to me, that's terrifying. I check my profit and loss every 2 days. Otherwise it gives me a heart attack. But those bits are so important, so you know if you can reinvest into your business or not, or do you need to be set up on a payment plan for tax, or can you pay it in full? All these things are really, really important, that because you don't know, or it makes you stressed out, or you don't like it, or you don't understand it, you just push it to one side until the very last minute.
Yeah, and I think we see with so many founders, they're focused on the thing they're trying to build rather than really understanding the money. And we do know that more financial education is so important. So I'm going to ask you a slightly loaded question because I know sort of the answer, which is, great, Hardy Accounting is not your only business, is it?
No, it's not.
So tell me how you went from 3 months, because it was raining in Bali, starting a business, actually matching what you would have earned if you'd stayed in your corporate, building that business up. And then at what point did you go, do you know what, this isn't, I'm not busy enough, I'm going to do something else? And what was the first next thing that you did?
So the next thing I did was actually start my own podcast. So as you can probably tell, I'm quite chatty. I love the conversation and I love speaking to people. And I felt like as an accountant, I was speaking to my clients a lot, but actually it wasn't enough and I wanted to speak to more people. So I set up a podcast called The Unconventional Podcast, which was basically about promoting other unconventional routes to success, to basically show people that you don't have to go to uni to be successful. So I basically started bringing all my friends that I knew were business owners. And I was like, can you come on my podcast that absolutely no one knows about? And they were really great and they came on it. And I was really lucky that we got a sponsor from day one. So my first sponsor was my professional body because they wanted to get more young people into accounting, which was brilliant. So I interviewed loads of accountants and business owners. And then that kind of snowballed and we've had a sponsor for every season ever since, which is amazing because now it makes me a little bit of money, which is great because that's all everyone wants. And then from there, we opened another business, essentially helping UK companies or overseas companies open in different countries. So it's called Cross Border. So it basically says what it does on the tin. And we basically help open e-commerce brands through TikTok Shop and Amazon overseas. So you could be a UK brand wanting to go to the US or a US wanting to come to the UK. So that was loads of fun and really, really interesting. So that was the next one. And then we just launched as a training provider for accounting apprenticeships because it's obviously the next logical step. Obviously. But actually before that, we opened the financial education arm where we essentially use profits from the accounting firm to go do free talks about financial education to schools in London. Because for me, financial education is really important. My dad was really not that great with his money, and it ended up in a very serious, very stressful situation for us, which is something that I'd never want to get into. And so I went out very young and became financially educated. And I remember telling my mum, oh, I want to put some money in an ISA, and she turned around and she went, that's gambling, that's a terrible idea, don't do that. So I did it anyway, and my money grew. And then when she saw it, she was like, oh wow, could you teach me about that? That would be great. And so I did. And then I was teaching my friends about financial education whilst they were at university, understanding what student loans are and things like that. And then I wanted to do it in schools, and now I spend a lot of my time lobbying with the government to get legislative change on financial education.
And that, I'm with you. I think it's so important, and we just don't teach people about it. And the only reason, and I think our upbringing has an impact on whether we understand it or not, either because our parents teach us or because out of necessity we have to really understand it. So clearly very driven to make a difference as well as make money. And that, so what's next then for financial education training? Because I love that you're doing the stuff in schools. I think that's so important, because young kids, and the law is changing. We are going to see financial education from primary school age, actually, I think from 2028. But what's next then for that training business? And how do you, probably lots of listeners are going to want to know, how do you balance? I think, how many companies is it you've got now?
Oh, too many. I think it was 7 when we last spoke.
So has it gone up since then? That was only like 2 weeks ago. So how do you balance keeping an eye on all of those different businesses and managing the next big idea as it pops into your head? Because clearly you've got this ambition in your head which goes, oh, I can make a difference there, and off you go. And you've proved you can do it successfully. But how do you manage all of that?
I don't, to be honest. I think one of the ways I try and manage it is having regular catch-ups with each team for each business. So Hardy Accounting is the only one where I own 100% of it, that and the financial education business. All of the others I found co-founders for. So we're able to split that responsibility, and also someone is there to keep me accountable, which is really helpful. So there's regular catch-ups every single week with the team for the other businesses, which I find really invaluable. So we can touch base regularly to see where we're at and what needs to be done. And I think if I didn't have those touch points, then I wouldn't have put time aside so periodically to be able to do all of the things that I do. And for me, it's really about building out people, systems and processes. So in the accounting firm, for example, it's not just me. There is a team, and there's a whole thing of systems and workflows. So everyone knows what they're doing and everything is delegated to everyone. So we know that everything is taken care of. So I don't need to spend 5 days a week in that business, because it doesn't need me 5 days a week. So then I have space and opportunity to do other things that I want to build. And I think next to financial education, which is what I've been working on, is we're about to bring out third-party research that we did with YouGov around the Gen Z attitudes and understanding of financial education. Because every time I sit in Parliament on a white paper, the gap that's missing is Gen Z. They do loads for schools, which is great, and I'm all for, and I've spent loads of time lobbying for that. And they're doing loads of stuff for people of the older generation, but actually in the middle there's this massive gap missing. They're not doing anything for younger people who actually need it the most and want it. And so we've been doing a lot of work around that, and that's where the next business comes in, which is the student bank that I think we touched on last time we spoke, which is basically gamifying the way that students use their banking app and morphing financial education into that too.
Wow, so another business.
Another one, who would have thought?
But all on a very common theme. And going back to what you were saying about kind of setting up processes, how did you learn or teach yourself to make sure that you had a structure within your businesses to enable them to thrive?
So it wasn't until I got my first employee, and it was actually the week before she started. So everyone kept banging on about systems and processes, and I thought, I don't need them because they all live in here and it's only me, so I know exactly what's going on. And I'm too busy to write them down because no one else needs them, so what's the point? And then I hired my first employee and I thought, oh my God, she is starting. And there is nothing. There is no process that lives anywhere within the company network. And so I thought, brilliant. So I took myself to Morocco for a week and sat for 6 days and essentially wrote down every possible process I could think of. And now they all live in this massive bank of SOPs. And she was like, oh my God, it's brilliant, you've got so much stuff. And I was like, thank God for that. And so we have a piece of software called Engager, which essentially you can build out your own systems and workflows when anyone does a job, and it's like delegated to them and then they have to work through all the workflow. So I spent loads of time setting that up as well. And what was really helpful is when she started, she was like, oh, could we put in an email template here and put in a checklist there? And I was like, yeah, no problem. And that feedback was really helpful so that the SOPs become more robust, because they made sense in my head, but clearly my head isn't everyone else's.
And I think that's so important, isn't it? Especially the first time you're an employer. And how did that feel, taking on your first employee? Because that would terrify me. I mean, I've done it in a corporate job, but taking on someone in your own business, how did that feel?
Yeah, it felt really strange. So when I was in my apprenticeship, I was training graduates that had come out of university when I was about 19. And so I'd done all that training piece, but actually I had to be the recruiter too. And I found that to be the most challenging thing. Because I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to hire someone I'll put out and people can upload their CVs. And then I went, oh, now I have to come out with a whole hiring process of people, and I don't really know what that looks like because I've never hired anyone before. So I think that process was more of a struggle because people always put their best foot forward, and so you actually have no idea who you're hiring. And that's why obviously a probation period is really important, because I haven't had to use it yet, thank God, but you just don't know actually who you're hiring at the end of the day and if they'll be any good, because it's only a couple of interviews and then you have to offer someone the job, which is really difficult. But it felt very grown up, and I was like, okay, now this isn't just me working on my laptop anymore, like this is an actual business now.
And what have you learned about having staff? Because that, I think, is one of the challenges a lot of founders have, is when they're ploughing their own way just with them. It's hard, but it's all on you. But also it's all on you, so you don't have to rely on anyone else, you don't have to delegate. How have you found, especially across multiple businesses, how have you found being a boss?
I hate it. I kind of hate it, because I know what I was like to my bosses, and I'd be like, oh, this person's being really annoying today. And I know that at some point they're going to say something mean behind my back and I don't like it. But to be honest, you're only as good as you make your staff, and I'm a big believer in that. So if someone's not living up to what you want them to be, it's actually on you. So we have quarterly catch-ups. I mean, we catch up pretty much every day as a team. We have a half-an-hour call to touch base and see how things are going. But we have a quarterly, more in-depth check-in with everyone to go, okay, how are you? What are you struggling with? What can I help you with? How's it going? Because pretty much all of the businesses are remote businesses, and so you don't learn through osmosis, so it's really difficult. And I had one of my employees turn around and go, love it, it's fine, would love a bit more structure. And I was like, yeah, no problem, because it's been a bit chaotic the past few months. And she said, to be honest, I really want to learn how the business works, because she's like, I just get given my clients my work and I do it, but I actually have no idea how you operate as a business. And if someone was to ask me about something a bit niche, I would actually not know the answer, because I just do my bit and then I carry on with my day. And I was like, oh yeah, I've never really thought about it like that. So what we did is that we then put a whole day in the calendar. So she's coming to London and we're going to sit for a whole day and go through how every part of the business runs, not just the bit that she's in. So she has more visibility because she is stepping up and being a manager to one of the new employees that's coming in. And she was like, if they were to ask me a niche question, wouldn't know how to answer. So I don't really feel comfortable managing this person if I don't know the answers to the questions I think they're going to ask me. So I just need some help and some guidance. And I went, absolutely no problem. So it's really about listening to everyone's concerns and understanding all the different personalities and how they work and how they see reward. Because some of them see it as validation, others see it as monetary, others see it as flexibility. So it's really important to understand the different personalities of the people that you hire.
Yeah. And on that, you touched, so having staff is one thing, but you touched on a couple of your business being co-founded. How have you found the difference between being a solo founder and having all that autonomy and having a co-founder, which gives you backup, as you said, and means that takes some of the slack and gives you accountability, but you've then got a co-founder. How do you find the differences between the two?
I find it really interesting. So I've had businesses before with co-founders and it hasn't worked out. And that business has been dissolved and I've taken it as a whole and moved on with my life. And that's really difficult. But I kind of knew before I started that those businesses weren't going to last, and I could feel it in my gut. I just didn't listen to it because I thought the business was really cool. Whereas now I only take co-founders that I've actually known for a really long time. We've both come to an agreement. We have a really strong shareholders agreement in place, so we know what to do if someone wants to step away and what that would look like, which is really helpful. And I like those other businesses because the other person is completely different to me. We don't have the same strengths and we don't have the same weaknesses, which I think is really valuable. And actually they bring a completely different perspective, but they really respect my strengths and let me do what I want to do, and vice versa. And there's that mutual respect that I think is really, really important. And there's literally no overlap because they're so different to me. And I think when you start having that overlap, sometimes that's where that tension is.
That's a really good point, actually, because I think sometimes we think having an overlap, because it gives us commonality, is helpful. But actually, if everyone knows which bit they're doing, and you touched on having a co-founder agreement, which I agree, I think is so important, because it really sets out, it feels a bit odd when you're doing it. It's a bit like doing a prenup, isn't it?
Yeah.
But actually, it is really important to enable you to thrive as a business. I want to ask you about some of the big milestones that you've had. So what are kind of a few of the big milestones you've had in business? Obviously, your first employee, well, making it to 3 months and not getting fired is probably one. But what are a couple of the big milestones? Kind of how did it feel when you got to those milestones?
I mean, every milestone's been amazing. I think as business owners, we don't appreciate them enough. We are always moving the goalposts for what it means to be successful. Because if you told me I was here now with X amount of businesses turning over X amount, I'd been like, oh my God, I'd be the happiest person in the whole world. But the reality is, yeah, I am happy, but I'm also stressed like a lot of the time. And so I thought I would be happier probably than I am now, because now I'm here and I'm doing this, but actually I want to be over there. So it's actually trying to find those little small wins where you appreciate them. So I think at the beginning, for me, just having a 5K month was the best thing ever. And I was like, wow, I'm pretty loaded now. Watch out, everyone. And then I think moving into a flat in London by myself was a huge milestone, because I was like, wow. At the time, I think I was 22, and I was like, wow, I'm living by myself in London, this is so cool. And then I think, obviously, hiring my first employee was amazing. Getting my first CFO role, I was over the moon about, because I was like, wow, it's a lot of responsibility, and people think I'm there, and that's great. And then other ones, probably meeting the royal family. I got invited to meet the royal family in May.
Chuck that in, Grace. Okay, we're going to have to come back to that one. Come and tell us a bit more about that.
I essentially, long story short, the Department for Education found me on LinkedIn talking about the fact that I did an apprenticeship. So in 2024, I was invited to speak at that annual conference just about my journey, which was amazing. And it was the first proper public speaking I'd ever done. So I was terrified. Anyway, it went really well, which is great. They then invited me back the next year and so on. And then they invited me to their awards evening. So it was the National Apprenticeship and Skills Awards. And I was sat on this amazing table of MPs and everyone in government. And it was really an amazing experience. And then they had this special recognition award. And you couldn't nominate yourself for it. And it was a really lovely speech. And I was like, yeah, I love this. And then it was me, my name was called out, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. So they planned this to invite me so they could give me this award. So it was an absolutely amazing feeling. And then off the back of that, the Department for Education invited me to meet the royal family last May, which was incredible, basically to recognise all the work that I've done in apprenticeships and skills. So that was pretty crazy, and I was allowed to take my mum. And she was like, oh my God, how exciting. So we did a big day in London, and it was pretty much a whole day event, and it was amazing.
Yeah, that's one of those things that your younger self probably never thought she might have when she was, in primary school, getting diagnosed with dyslexia, in
Yeah.
secondary school thinking, oh, I don't really want to go to university, but I don't know what to do. So your mum telling you had to get a qualification was really pivotal, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So she was like, well, my sister was like, I really want to go to the palace. And my mum said, well, no, A, I birthed her, so I get to go. And B, I was actually the one to tell her to do an apprenticeship, so I'm pretty sure I get to go.
She's higher up the rankings, I think. Well,
Yeah,
when you get to
exactly.
go back, maybe take your sister then.
Well, they've had this conversation and my mum's already said no.
Oh, right, she's still calling rank, is she?
Yeah, she is.
Excellent. I love it. Thinking about kind of the things that you've learned running a business, what are your biggest kind of takeaways that you've learned so far in business, and what are the things you still think you've got to learn?
I think one of the biggest takeaways is you always need to ask for help, and asking for help is not a weakness. It's actually it's like a sign of strength that you've identified something that you need help with, and that's absolutely fine. And I think that's really important. So I've built a network of other accountants and professionals around me, so when I come across something I don't know the answer to, it's fine, and I just text them going, hey, I'm really stuck on this, could you help me? Because as a business owner, you're never going to know everything, and that's fine, especially when it comes to accounting. Legislation is constantly changing all of the time, and people have such niche situations, and you go, okay, let me go get some professional advice, and then I'll come back to you with the answer. And that's really valuable because it shows integrity as well. You're not just giving an answer for the sake of giving an answer, you're giving like a well thought out, structured, correct answer. I think the next thing is definitely getting help before you think you need it. So when I hired my first employee, we were so at capacity, it was a joke. I was pretty much crying every day because I wasn't getting any sleep, and I was working like 16-hour days because I was like, I don't really want to delegate, because I like had a bit of a control issue, because my first business is like my baby, and I was like, oh, I don't really care if other people come into the other ones, but like this one's like my business. And so I had a real issue with like letting control go. And as soon as I let go of some of that control, then actually we could grow, because it wasn't all on me. And as one person, you can only do so much. And I think delegation is still an issue for me. I definitely go, oh, I could give that to someone, but actually I could do it quicker. But then if you've got loads of tasks that are taking up 20 minutes each, well, then actually you've just wasted loads of time anyway, and you should have just given it to someone in the first place. And I also think enjoying the journey more is something that I really struggle with. So I'm constantly looking at what's next, what can we do, what's the next milestone. But actually when I get to the end and I finish my business or I sell it, whatever it may be, I probably won't feel that bit of relief. I will have like missed the journey and actually doing it. So just being a bit more in the moment.
This is quite connected, but slightly different question is, if you could tell the world one thing that is hard about being a founder, what's the one thing?
Resilience. I can expand on it if you want. Didn't know if you wanted a one-word answer.
No, tell us a bit more.
I think being a business owner is like constantly putting out fires every single day. And I don't think I've actually had one day where there's been no issues. And I think that's kind of just life. But it's always self-doubt, other people's opinions creeping in, or just something going wrong, like the smallest thing you couldn't even think of when you started a business. And it's actually having that resilience to keep going, because some days it's really difficult and there's more problems than there was yesterday. And you're like, God, is this even worth it anymore? Because all it is ag after ag after ag. And I just kind of don't want to do this anymore. But it's having the resilience to keep going, because you do have really great days.
And so I asked the question the other way around then. If you could tell the world the greatest thing about being a founder, what would you say?
I would say that just the things you accomplish is stuff that you would never dream of. Like the opportunities I've had running a business, I would never get in a corporate job. Like I've been lucky enough to obviously meet the royal family. I've spoken at the House of Commons, the House of Lords. I was at dinner at the House of Lords last Tuesday, and I was like, I would never get this opportunity in a corporate job, like ever. And I think it's all those opportunities that you get because you're a business owner and because you're putting yourself out there, and the rewards are greater, but the stress may be a little bit more. But in a corporate job, you're quite boxed in, like there is a ceiling to what you can achieve, but when you're a business owner, there isn't.
And this is the, I'm going to ask you one last question, and then I'm going to ask you to share just some thoughts about being a founder more broadly. But what would you tell your younger self that maybe at 18 when you were going into your apprenticeship, or at 20 when you decided to start your business? What would you tell her that you think would really have helped her?
I would have definitely said to care less. All through my childhood growing up, I cared so much about what people thought about me. I would be that person wearing makeup going to school because I thought someone would say something like about my eye bags or a pimple I had. And it actually really wasn't that deep. But I cared so much. And even when I was doing my apprenticeship, I cared what my school thought about me, and that they thought I was dumb for choosing an apprenticeship and not wanting to go to university, because my school just cast me aside as soon as I said I didn't want to go to university.
Wow.
They were like, okay, well, good luck with that. And that was the end, and no one helped me. And then when I was quitting my job, my partner at the time wasn't very supportive, and he was like, what do you mean you're starting a business? It's literally a terrible idea. And then I started it, and he was like, well, you have to quit it and come travel with me, or we're going to break up. And I cared so much at the time. Obviously we broke up. But at the time I was like, God, I really care about this so much. I care about what other people think of me. But I should have just cared less and continued to care less.
Yeah, I think that's a really good piece of advice. I always think it's one thing I wish I'd learned earlier on is nobody's thinking about you.
Yeah, no one cares.
Because they're all so busy thinking about themselves. And I think it's one of those things that the earlier in life we learn that actually everyone is so busy worrying about themselves. You think how much we think about what's going on in our lives. Actually, they're too busy worrying about themselves than they are to be worrying about you. So just, do your thing. Because actually, they're just doing their own thing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The more you worry, it only impacts you, no one else, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this, Grace. It's been so interesting to hear your story. And I think... you are obviously much younger than a lot of entrepreneurs, but you've done so much already, and you clearly have just got a real skill for this stuff and the resilience and the grit to do it. If you can leave our listeners with any thoughts about being a founder, your journey, just the things you would like them to know about what it is like when you're a woman running a business, what would those final thoughts be?
I think that you definitely need to have a lot of self-confidence. There's a lot of times where I've been in a room and people have been like, so whose PA are you? Or I say I run an accounting firm, and they go, oh, whose accounting firm? And I go, mine. And they go, whose? And I go, mine. Oh. And it doesn't really register in their heads. Or they think that it's my dad's accounting firm that's been brought down to me and all that sort of stuff. And it's actually having the self-confidence to just go, no, it's mine. If you're not going to appreciate that, then I'm just going to leave this conversation. We had it once with someone where they came in to have a conversation with us because we were going to help them raise some money. And we went around the room doing introductions, and I was just sat last on the chairs, and that was kind of fine. And the person directly went to me and went, oh, so I just presume you work for him then? And I had to turn around and go, no, he actually works for me. And I feel like this is probably a waste of our time, but thanks for coming in. And it's just small interactions like that where you have to have the self-confidence to speak up for yourself. And it is difficult being a female founder, but at the same time, the female founder community is one of the best communities I've ever been in. Basically, all of my friends are female founders, and they just get it. And it's so nice. And there's so much understanding and grace and almost a pay it forward mentality where you can let anyone know that you're struggling and they'll go, how can I help? And that's the first thing that they will say. Not, oh, God, that's a bit of rubbish, you're struggling with that. It's, no, how can we proactively make your life better and easier? And I think once you build a community around you, pretty much any hurdle you can get through.
Yeah, and I think that's so true. I remember the first female founder event I think I ever went to, and there were actually some competitors in the room, some founders who did similar businesses. And I was stood having a conversation. They both worked in the jewellery industry, and I'll never forget it. And we were stood and we introduced each other. They actually knew each other already. And one of them just turned around to the other one and just said, what's the thing you're really struggling with at the moment? Can I help? And I was like, there's not many rooms where you would see that. But I think in that founder community, it really is a desire to help each other, because the whole purpose of the podcast, this podcast, which is Women Are Good Business, is the economic value of women running businesses is huge. So actually, and I think we all want to help each other. I think generally women do like to pay it forward. And that's not to say men don't, but I think especially in that founder community, I've found since I've started out on my own, anybody I've asked for help has said yes.
Yeah.
And I think that is our superpower, right? Is actually we do like to pay it forward and we like to help others out. And I think that does make female founders an absolute, power to be reckoned with. Grace, thank you so much for sharing your journey with us today. I've really appreciated it. It's been so much fun learning a bit more about all of the businesses that you run and the journey that you've had through, and from meeting the royal family to started a business because it was raining in Bali. What an amazing journey. And I know you will continue to go on to be amazingly successful. So thank you for sharing your story so far.
Thank you for having me on.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of Women Are Good Business podcast. And thank you for listening. Now I need your help. We want to make the podcast huge. We want more people to hear about the stories of female founders. We want to get the best experts in the world so we can grill them with your questions, and we can only do that if people know where to find us. So please help us make the podcast go viral. Like, follow, subscribe, leave us a review, drop us into a WhatsApp group. Whatever is the best way to share, please do share and come with us on the journey as we talk to lots of female founders and we show the world that women really are good business.